You are standing outside a quiet home in Denver, Colorado. It's the kind of street where nothing ever happens, where neighbors wave from their porches, where kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on. But behind one of these doors, on a July night in 2013, something happened that would tear a family apart forever. A daughter, a mother, and a knife. By the time police arrived, the woman inside would already be dead, and the person who called them, the person who begged for help, was the one who had done it. Her name was Isabella Guzman. She was 18 years old. This is not a story about a monster. Or at least, it's not that simple. This is a story about a mind breaking apart in slow motion, about a family that saw the warning signs and didn't know what to do with them.
To
And
truly
about a
understand
single
security,
night
you
of
must first
violence
understand
so
your
brutal,
enemy.
it would force
Every
an
system has a
entire legal
vulnerability
system
waiting to
ask
be
one
exploited.
question.
Your job is to
Can
find
someone
it
be
first.
guilty of murder if their mind was no longer their own? Stay with this one, because by the end, you may not have an easy answer either. To understand what happened in that house, you need to understand who Isabella Guzman was before it happened. She grew up in Denver, the daughter of Yolanda Guzman, a woman who, like so many single mothers, worked hard to give her children a stable life. Yolanda was known to those around her as devoted, protective, the kind of mother who kept trying, even when things at home became harder than anyone outside the family could see. Because something was happening to Isabella, something that, in hindsight, had been building for years. Family members and acquaintances would later describe a teenager who seemed to be pulling away from reality. Isabella had reportedly struggled with her mental health for some time, mood swings that swung too far, behavior that didn't quite track with the world everyone else was living in. Some who knew her said she talked about voices, about feelings that something or someone was after her. At the time, few people around her had the vocabulary or the resources to understand what those signs meant. Mental illness in a teenager is easy to mistake for teenage moodiness, easy to hope will pass. It didn't pass. Is less than pause is greater than. And by the summer of 2013, whatever had been growing quietly inside Isabella's mind was no longer quiet at all. On the night of the 24th of July 2013, something inside that house went past the point of no return. According to reports, Isabella called 911 herself. Her voice on the line was not calm. It was not composed. It was the voice of someone who had just crossed a line so extreme, so final, that there was no walking it back. She told the dispatcher what she had done. She told them her mother was dead, and she told them she had done it. When police arrived at the home, they found Yolanda Guzman deceased, having suffered multiple stab wounds. The scene, according to those close to the investigation, was one of extreme violence, the kind that doesn't happen in a single moment of panic, but in a sustained, overwhelming loss of control. Isabella was still there. She did not run, she did not hide. In many accounts, she seemed almost disconnected from what had just happened, as if some part of her was watching it unfold from somewhere else entirely. She was arrested at the scene. For investigators, the physical facts of the case were not in question. Isabella Guzman had killed her mother, and there was no meaningful dispute about who held the knife. The real question, the one that would consume the courtroom for the next 2 years, was not what happened. It was why. Is less than pause is greater than. And more specifically, was Isabella Guzman in control of her own mind when she did it? Before we go further into the courtroom, you need to sit with who was lost that night. Yolanda Guzman was not a headline. She was a mother who, by every account, had spent years trying to hold her family together through circumstances that would have broken many people. Friends and relatives described her as someone who never stopped trying, who kept showing up for her daughter even as the signs of a deteriorating mental state became harder to ignore. In the weeks and months before her death, those close to the family say Yolanda had grown increasingly worried. She reportedly sought help, tried to get her daughter support, tried to keep the peace inside a home that was slowly becoming unrecognizable to her. She did not know that the last conversation she would ever have would end in violence. There is a particular kind of tragedy in this story that true crime often glosses over. This was not a stranger. This was not a calculated act of greed or jealousy. This was a mother killed by the child she had spent her whole life trying to protect, a child whose mind prosecutors and defense attorneys would spend years arguing over, may or may not have understood what she was doing at all. Is less than, pause is greater than. Whatever the answer, one fact remains unchanged. A woman who tried her best is gone, and the family left behind would have to live with both halves of that loss, grieving a mother and somehow still having to reckon with a daughter. When the case reached the courtroom, Isabella Guzman's defense team took an approach that immediately made headlines across Colorado: not guilty by reason of insanity. It's one of the most misunderstood defenses in criminal law. Contrary to popular belief, it does not mean she didn't do it. It means something far more complicated, that at the moment of the act, the defendant's mental state was so impaired that she could not understand the nature of what she was doing or could not tell right from wrong. For Isabella's defense, this meant presenting evidence of a long, documented history of mental illness. Testimony reportedly detailed delusions, possible psychosis, and a break from reality that had been building for months, if not years, before that July night. Prosecutors, meanwhile, argued the opposite, that regardless of any underlying mental health struggles, Isabella had known exactly what she was doing when she picked up that knife, and that calling 911 herself, being able to describe the event afterward, suggested a level of awareness inconsistent with true insanity under the law. The courtroom became a battleground of psychiatric evaluations. Expert witnesses on both sides examined the same set of facts and arrived at dramatically different conclusions about the same young woman's mind. Is less than, pause is greater than. It's one of the hardest things for the human brain to accept, that guilt and mental illness are not opposites, that someone can be both responsible under the law and also undeniably unwell. After a trial that stretched the legal system's understanding of criminal responsibility to its limits, the case reached its conclusion. The details of the final verdict matter enormously here, and this is exactly the kind of fact that deserves to be pulled from a primary source before this goes to air, because outcomes in insanity cases can hinge on very specific legal findings that get simplified or misreported over time. What is consistent across public reporting is this: Isabella Guzman's case became one of the more closely watched criminal mental health cases in Colorado in recent memory, precisely because it forced jurors, lawyers, and the public to sit with an uncomfortable truth that mental illness does not always look like what we expect it to look like, and that the line between criminal and sick is not always as clean as the justice system would like it to be. Whatever the final legal outcome, one thing is certain: Isabella Guzman did not walk away from that courtroom unchanged, any more than her family walked away from that house unchanged. Is less than, pause is greater than. Some sentences are handed down by a judge, others are handed down by grief, and they last far longer. The people left behind rarely get the spotlight in stories like this one, but they are the ones who carry it the longest. Yolanda's other family members were forced to do something almost impossible: mourn a mother while trying to understand a sibling or daughter who had caused her death. There is no support group built for that specific kind of loss. No easy way to grieve one family member while still, in some way, having to hold space for another. For a family already stretched thin by years of managing a loved one's undiagnosed or unmanaged mental illness, the tragedy did not end with the trial. It became the story their family would be known for, whispered about by neighbors, picked apart online, reduced to headlines that could never capture what it had actually felt like to live inside that house before the breaking point. Is less than, pause is greater than. That is the part of this story that rarely makes it into the true crime retellings. The years of quiet warning signs that came before the 10 minutes of violence everyone ends up talking about. In the years since, the case of Isabella Guzman has resurfaced again and again in local news retrospectives, in true crime forums, in documentaries and videos just like this one. Part of what keeps this case alive in the public consciousness is exactly the tension we've walked through together, the impossibility of putting it into a single, comfortable category. It is not a simple murder story. It is not a simple mental health story. It sits in the space between, and that space makes people uneasy, which is exactly why they keep returning to it. Every retelling adds something: every version strips something away. What tends to survive across every account is the core of it. A mother who tried, a daughter whose mind failed her or who failed the people who loved her, depending on who you ask, and a single night that neither the courts nor the internet have ever fully agreed on how to explain. Is less than, pause, is greater than. Maybe that's the real reason this case refuses to fade. Not because it's shocking, but because it refuses to give us the clean ending we always want from stories like this. You came into this story looking for a villain. Maybe you're leaving with something harder to hold. A young woman whose mind broke long before that night did, a mother who spent her life trying to catch her daughter before she fell, and a legal system asked to draw a hard line through something that has never, in the history of medicine or justice, had one. Isabella Guzman's story isn't finished being told, and maybe it never fully will be, because some tragedies don't resolve. They just get carried, by families, by courts, by all of us who keep coming back to try to understand them. If this story affected you the way it affected us putting it together, let us know in the comments. And if you want to understand how the justice system handles mental illness in other cases like this one, we've covered similar stories. You'll find them linked right here.